Morning, YouTube. Well, it's the early morning hours here, about 4:30 in the morning, and I've been up a few hours. Had some trouble sleeping. Got up, made some biscuits from scratch, a little sausage gravy. Waiting on the sun to come up and thinking about turning out here a little bit. But I was sitting there over biscuits, thinking about breeding terriers, something I think a lot about and do a lot of. And I wanted to talk a little bit about line breeding. And to some of you, you understand line breeding. To other people that don't understand line breeding, it's just another term for inbreeding. The term inbreeding has some pretty negative connotations in the human race, but we refer to it as line breeding in the terriers. And I wanted to kind of explain the good and the bad in line breeding, and things you need to look for, and when to do it, and when not to, and what to expect. So we'll do that now. Now, to some people, breeding dogs is pure science. To others, it's just an art. To me, and to a lot of other people, it's a combination of both. You need to have an understanding of both. I'll give you, for instance, on that. Just last week, I had a guy write me, and he was apparently all science. He wanted a pup off a little bit, and it needed to be a chocolate pup. And he explained to me, he really seemed like he was trying to educate me, which I already understood. That little bit carries a marker for that color, and her pups will carry the marker for that color, and 50% of her pups will be that color, red or chocolate or, however you want to classify it. And I told him that was great, but I don't have any pups available that suit his needs. But I can tell you this, Little Bit had pups 3 days ago. 5 of them are black. One of them was chocolate. So, that science didn't hold true there. And the deal is it will hold true, but that's over a large population. If she has 1,000 puppies, you would probably end up with 50% chocolate, 50% black. Daisy's another case in point. Female I have, great dog, one of our foundation dogs. And, the science, and I'm not exactly sure, but it's about 50-50 male-female. And I had a whole list of people looking for males, and she had 7 pups one time. Every single pup was a female. 7 females and not a male in the litter. Okay, but the odds and the science say 50-50, half and half, but it wasn't. Over a large population, it will be. I have faith in the science, and it'll be close to that. And so breeding is, I guess what I'm getting at is breeding is more combination of science and art, and a lot of hit and miss, guesswork, and you cross your best to your best and hope for the best. So we'll get into a little bit on line breeding there by saying I'm not an authority on any of this. Now, these are just my thoughts. This is what I've come away with after 50 years of owning dogs. Been on the planet 58 years. Always had one, sometimes a bunch. Always watch them and study them. But the line breeding is when you cross a mother to a son, a father to a daughter, or you cross cousins, anything interrelated, and you get what's calculated as an inbreeding coefficient, which is expressed as a percentage using Wright's formula, which I don't understand. I have a program that does it. It's a curiosity to me. I look at the numbers, but I don't pay much attention to them because I pay attention to the dogs and the offspring. And I guess the most important thing to start off with is, a lot of people are line breeding dogs because they like their dogs and they want to produce dogs like that. But here's what you run into when you line breed. When you line breed, what you're doing is you're amplifying traits of those dogs. If those dogs have a similar trait and it's really something that you like, if you cross those dogs, the chances are you're going to amplify that trait. It's going to be present and even stronger most of the time in the pups. So the negative side to that, because there are no perfect terriers. I don't want a perfect terrier. I can find a little fault with every one of them. Something I would change just a little bit, even my best ones. But when you line breed, you're amplifying every trait that they have in common, and sometimes there are negative traits. And when you line breed, you're going to amplify those negative traits. Let's say you got an awesome stud dog, but he's a little dog aggressive. You got an awesome female, she's a little bit aggressive, a little too aggressive. Well, to me, that's a genetic trait. When you cross those two overly aggressive dogs, you're going to have super overly aggressive pups, in my opinion. And that's not something we want to carry forward. At least not here for me. And we see that a lot. So out of all the line breeding that goes on, a lot of it is a mistake, because very few dogs. You want to cross dogs that have the greatest strengths and the fewest weaknesses as possible. And you want them to be similar traits, because they're going to amplify those. And so what you've got to do that most people can't do is look at their terriers objectively and decide what are the negatives, and what are the positives. Sometimes people have trouble finding fault with their terriers, just like they have trouble finding fault with themselves. It's just human nature. So you got to be objective. You've got to look at things from without the emotions and the love you have for them, and say, okay, what do I want to amplify here, and what's going to be the downside on each one of these crosses? Okay, and that's where you have to start with line breeding. So now we've established what line breeding is. It's the interbreeding of closely related dogs of the same genetics. And we've established what it does. It amplifies the traits that those dogs have in common. And the problem we have with it is that although it amplifies the positive traits of those dogs, it also amplifies the negative traits equally. So if you don't, your best candidates for line breeding are as close to perfect terriers as you can produce. And if there's too many negatives, you want to stay away from line breeding. And that's just part of it. Now with Jack Russell Terriers, I've never owned one. I don't know how their kennel club works, but a friend that raises them told me that 16% inbreeding coefficient, using the Wright's formula that I mentioned earlier, is the highest inbreeding coefficient a Jack Russell Terrier can have to be registered. Okay, to me that's ridiculous, but to each their own. That just expresses a value, imaginary value of how closely related the dog's ancestors are. And what we really need to look at, some people have a formula on their line breeding. Some people want to go in 3 times, line breed 3 times, and they go for an outcross. An outcross is a totally unrelated dog. You're looking to introduce new genes to the gene pool, and it just kind of shuffles the genes again. And then you can go back to line breeding. The problem with that, if you're going to have an outcross, you really want a dog that has the same great strengths and characteristics, and that dog needs to be a producer. That dog needs to throw those strengths and characteristics in his pups or her pups. And that's an important factor. There's a lot of great dogs that aren't great producers. And so you really have to have both. And to me, I used to go with everybody on maybe 3 times and then go with the outcross. But to me, I'm just keep going in. I keep an eye on the inbreeding coefficient on my breeding program on my computer because it calculates it, but it's just a novelty to me. But I go in until I see negative things, maybe genetic disorders, which I haven't seen, overly aggressive dogs, which I haven't seen. Now they're aggressive, but I can control that. I can work them from pups on getting along with other dogs, and as long as I can do that, Patterdales are aggressive dogs, but we're looking for aggression that we can't stop is overly aggressive. But long as the pups are doing good, I raise the pups, I hunt them, I'll keep going back in. You know, line breeding in people is inbreeding. And that's, I mean, morally to me, that's wrong. But when you notice it, or the deformities that come from, if we talk about dogs, it would be negative traits. We see deformities, speech impediments, mental disorders, and things. And to me, that's the same thing as with line breeding dogs. If those are negative traits of the parents that are closely related, that were crossed, and those traits are amplified in the offspring. Now, I don't know this for a fact, but I think if you had a beautiful interrelated couple, both great concert pianists, and they didn't have any genetic disorders, and if you cross those two people like you would line breeding dogs, I think they would produce children that were exceptional pianists, exceptional beauty, and great genetics, few disorders. And I think the traits would be amplified. But, you don't notice that in people. You don't look at beautiful people that are talented and say they're inbred or they're line bred. We just see that in people who express the negative traits, and that's sad. I don't advocate none of that, but it's just kind of a way to show you my thoughts on line breeding on dogs and the taboo that it has because of inbreeding in people. And really, line breeding is the greatest way to have the greatest chance to produce the greatest pups with the greatest strengths and the fewest weaknesses if you do it right and if you're honest with yourself on the dogs that you're crossing. And so that's my thoughts on line breeding. I do a lot of it here. While we're on the topic of line breeding, it's a good time to discuss, our stud dogs. Mention a few things. We get a lot of calls, people wanting to breed to our males, but we don't breed outside females. So I don't stud boomer out or any of my other males. And the reason for that is here on my yard, I want to control the genetics and the breeding. If let's say boomer, if I put him on if I stud him out, someone could breed him to a brood bitch, their brood bitch. And to me, in the terrier world, it seems a brood bitch is just a word for a female that they're breeding, I come from hounds years ago, and to us, a brood bitch was a bitch with pretty papers that wasn't proven, never hunted, but she had a pretty pedigree, and you would breed her to a stud dog that had a nice pedigree to sell pups. And that was a brood bitch. And I don't want to breed to anybody's brood bitches. You may have some great bitches, but I don't know them. As you can tell from this video, I think the greatest way to produce the greatest pups is through line breeding. I'm happy. I would probably breed, one of our pups back to one of my dogs for somebody. But as far as outside females, even as an outcross, I wouldn't be interested in studying out our dogs. And that's just part of the pride you take of, putting your name on a piece of paper where, your work is out there. And if somebody just breeds a brood bitch, it's not proven, but has a pretty pedigree, with one of your dogs, 50% of the genes are going to come from that female. If they're not related, there's no telling what you're going to get. When somebody gets a bad one, or if you get a whole litter of bad ones, the blame usually goes to the stud dog. So I don't breed outside females. I never have. I turned down any requests for it. I would consider, if somebody had a proven bitch pup that they got from us that's related to what we're doing now, and that's something I would discuss. But other than that, I thought I'd put that out there. Now, we're going to go hunt. You suffered through a bunch of this. So if you made it this far, I appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed it. We're about an hour away from loading some dogs. And I don't know what's going to happen. A lot of the hunting that I've got right now has got deer hunters on it, so I have to stay off of it until deer season's over in late November. I've got a few places left I can hunt. like I've said in other videos, half of it's genetics and half of it's field work. So you got to go when you want to go. You got to go when you don't want to go if you want to have great terriers. I keep going on the mornings that I'm tired and I've got other things to do and I don't want to go, for the sole reason that I don't want to wake up in 3 years and find I've got a bunch of terriers with great genetics that are mediocre dogs in my kennel. So, they're bred on the yard where I hunt on creeks. They're made on the creek. You got to keep them out there. The genetics are in there. You got to get it out with experience. Every time you hunt, they'll learn something, pick something up. And the end goal is to have a kennel full of dogs where anybody can walk up and want to see your dog work. And you say, pick one. They're all great. Pick one. That's what we're after. And with no shame, So take a lot of pride in that. We're going to go turn out, see what happens with these pups. We're going to take Boomer and Molly. Molly has pups right now, but they're about 2 weeks away from leaving, and they're awesome. But Molly, she is the most underrated girl I got now. Everybody loves Little Bit. I think it's because I show Little Bit so much, but I got to start showing Molly more. She's a little older, and she's everything Little Bit is. She's a little harder-headed, harder to break off trash, but she's probably grittier. Now, there's no backup in her. You wouldn't know she was a female when she attacked a big coon. And she works so hard. She gets in the toughest stuff. She's out of shape. Coming off a litter, I had her out last week, out of shape, and she just never missed a step. So I really love this dog. I nearly lost her a few times, and she's made some great pups. Jet, the one drowned by a coon fighting, was a great pup. And, she was out of Molly. It really broke my heart to lose her. So we're going to go hunting. And thanks you guys for hanging in there again. I appreciate all of you.